So as promised, today's guest is Alston's Harry Mattison, and we're going to talk quite a bit about what's called the I-90 interchange. But first, Harry, you didn't grow up in Alston. Tell us where you're really from.
Morning, Tommy. So I'm really from Brookline. I grew up on Pond Ave, right across from Leverett Pond. Spent a lot of time in Brookline Village, Brookline High, class of 1990.
And some viewers may recognize the Mattison name. Tell us about other Mattisons who have been active in Brookline and Boston.
Sure. So my parents, Hugh and Arlene, still live on Pond Ave. My dad's a longtime town meeting member, and they've been great advocates for improving the Emerald Necklace and all of the Olmsted parks in Brookline, among many, many other things. And then my two younger sisters, Lauren and Erica, have been active in a whole lot of different political and environmental issues in Brookline and Boston and beyond.
But you stretched your wings and you flew out of the nest all the way to Alston and raising a family there. In your time in Alston, you've certainly become involved in neighborhood and local politics there. And then this project came up that I know you have invested an incredible amount of time and effort in shaping, and that relates to I-90. But to set the stage, I want to sort of walk through the different components, starting with the yards or the rail yards. Can you sort of give us a feel for what they are and what changed? And while you're doing that, I think I'm going to pull up the map so I can show folks where we're talking about.
So there's more than 100 acres of undeveloped land in Alston, just on the backside of or the BU campus, in between Comm Ave and the Star Market over there, that again is just across the line from Brookline. And stretching up past the rail yards, the highway interchange, going up towards the Doubletree Hotel along the Charles River and the River Street Bridge. There's all the off ramps and the tangled spaghetti that you see there. It's really one of Boston's last huge undeveloped parcels of land, right? Suffolk Downs is one. And this land in Alston, owned by Harvard, is the other. So it's a really huge chance to shape the future of how the city and the region is going to develop, and what our priorities are going to be for transportation, and for how people live. What's urban life in the 21st century going to be in Boston?
And it would certainly be possible to develop the land now in between the spaghetti strands. But as it turns out, there's another opportunity to realign some infrastructure because of the condition of the viaduct. Can you sort of walk us through, when we say the viaduct, what we mean, where we're talking about, and why it's something to be dealt with in the near term?
So if you're heading outbound on the turnpike, as you come under the BU bridge, you rise up on an elevated highway structure, right? It's 8 lanes of highway, has train tracks underneath it for the Worcester line, and you have the BU campus, the tall dormitories for Student Village on one side, at Nickerson Field, and the Charles River on the other side. And that elevated highway, was built in the 60s when the turnpike extension was built, and it's now older and needs to be repaired or replaced.
So given that substantial work is going to have to be done to repair or replace, realign the viaduct, and given this opportunity over at the rail yards, there's an opportunity to do both at once and straighten out the highway, clean up the on-ramps and off-ramps, and that essentially reclaims land from Robert Moses and his ilk, you could say. And that's where we are now. But unlike, I'm gonna pull the book, right? Unlike during the time of Robert Moses, we don't just think of transportation as highways for people from the suburbs to come downtown to work and back again. Can you walk us through some of the other amenities or desired things for folks in that space above and beyond the Mass Pike? What else is competing for that space?
Well, there are two huge transit opportunities that really need to be an integral part of all of this planning. The first one we can talk about more on a local scale is a opportunity to improve or put alongside the 66 bus, which we know runs from Harvard Square through Brookline. It's slow. It's one of the, it connects key job centers, key housing areas, and is one of the most heavily used bus lines. And you could run new bus service from Harvard Square down to Comm Ave into the BU area that, and then continuing towards Longwood or, other points in that area that would run straight through this site. And, going back, if anyone remembers the urban ring planning, this was looked at back then as a huge opportunity and, would certainly improve a lot of crosstown bus service connecting, parts of Boston medical area, Nubian Square, Alston, Brookline, Harvard Square as well. And then more regionally, Greater Boston has a huge problem with east-west travel into the city, right? Route 9 is, not a great way to travel from Framingham into downtown at all. And the Mass Pike's really, is your other option. And if you're traveling on the Mass Pike and trying to get to, you work in North Station, you work in Kendall Square, other booming parts of Cambridge, there's no good way to get there by car. There's no good way to get there by transit today. And so there's an opportunity that started gaining traction during the Patrick administration to build a new train station in Alston. It would be a stop on the Worcester line for all those folks coming from Worcester, Natick, Springfield, and Newton, where you could then transfer to what's called the Grand Junction line. It runs under the BU Bridge and then can connect to Kendall Square and North Station. And so the ability to, say you live in Natick, want to work in Kendall Square and have a really quick, direct route on a train would be a huge game changer in terms of where people can live and how people can get access to jobs.
So we're talking about the idea for West Station, right?
Exactly.
And that would be just north of Comm Ave, around Babcock Street, maybe a little bit east or west of Babcock Street, but north of Comm Ave. And we're talking about a commuter rail station to serve folks coming either eastbound or westbound, right? It would also certainly serve folks in Alston and Brookline who were anti-commuting, who were commuting outbound, or even were going into North Station. You could just hop on the commuter rail and get there quickly. Of course, it also connects with the B line, is right there. And as you said, the 66 and several other buses as well. So it's a transit hub that would serve both local routes and regional routes. It would also, I would add, create a tremendous opportunity for the Brookline tax base, because if folks are coming in from Natick or Newton and getting off at West Station to go to office buildings built on the south side of Commonwealth Avenue, where the muffler shops are now, that's Brookline tax base. Those buildings are in Brookline, and commercial tax base, of course, helps pay for all of the amenities in Brookline. So West Station has tremendous potential benefits for the Brookline budget as well. So that gets us some mass transit, but tell us about opportunities for transit or recreation on an individual scale, perhaps free of engines of any kind?
Well, so anyone who's been along the Charles River paths on the Boston side of the river knows that the worst stretch anywhere on the Charles River is from the BU Bridge to the River Street Bridge, right? You're on a tiny, narrow path. You have a really miserable shoreline, eroded shoreline between you and the river. So there's no good views. There's no real connection or feeling of that the river is right next to you in any sort of pleasant way. And if you're heading inbound at night, you have the headlights from the cars blinding you as you travel toward in that direction. The Charles River is such a jewel for Boston and Cambridge and people in Newton and Brookline and Watertown and all over. Here's a chance to take what you're showing now, this really cramped, miserable, narrow section, make it much wider, make it both more enjoyable when you're there, and also connect it better for people in Brookline and Cambridge and Boston. If you're on Comm Ave, if you've come down Babcock Street or Pleasant Street or Amory Street, and you want to get down to the river on the Boston side, there's no good way to do it. You can go down to the sort of behind the BU Law School and go over that footbridge, but that has stairs. So if you're carrying a bike, that really isn't the way to go. And so one opportunity this project creates is if instead of building a new elevated highway, you build the highway flat on the ground, then you can connect over the highway with new footbridges. If you want to bring up that image, one connection is possible down more near the Amory Street BU Bridge area. And the one that's on the screen right now is a little bit further west up, between Nickerson Field and BU's Aganis Arena. You could come down Pleasant Street from Brookline, cross Comm Ave, and then come to a really nice pedestrian footbridge, crossing over the highway and bringing you down to a expanded and much improved park and paths along the Charles River.
Now I want to ask you about the river itself. It's a funny name for a body of water because it wasn't a river 400 years ago. It wasn't a river 300 years ago. I don't think it was a river 200 years ago. It's an estuary, right? And in fact, Bostonians and folks in the Commonwealth have dramatically changed this entire body of water over the past 200, 100, even 50 years. And the boundary lines, the borders of the river now are not where God put them, certainly. So surely we could just move them again to make this project work, right? Can't we just change the where the river meets the land, move it, make the river a little narrower, maybe make it a little wider somewhere else? Can't we just do that?
Well, we can do a lot of different things. And so, yeah, part of what's happening right now is that there's some real paralysis in MassDOT's leadership trying to figure out, well, what to do here, right? There's near unanimous opposition to rebuilding a new elevated highway viaduct. And the vast majority of cities and towns and advocacy organizations and private citizens, business groups, and universities all support building everything flat on the ground. That's 2 train tracks for the Worcester line, 2 train tracks for future service on that Grand Junction line connecting across the river to North Station and Kendall. And the current layout is 8 highway lanes and 4 lanes on Soldiers Field Road. Now, how do you make that all fit? Well, it sort of depends on what your priorities and values are. If And it's important also to add that during construction, no matter what you rebuild, the highway is going to be reduced from 8 lanes to 6 lanes. And that construction is going to last 10 years. So if you think 10 years ahead to when that might be after the project finally gets started, it's the year 2035. With climate change, with growing environmental awareness, how do we want people to be moving in and out of the city or around the city? If you insist that we're going to need to go back to having 12 highway lanes right along the river in the year 2035, then that makes it harder to fit everything together. But if you can make the lanes a little narrower, make the highway shoulders a little bit narrower, maybe build a boardwalk into the river, or an elevated pedestrian path above the water or above Soldiers Field Road, you can fit everything just fine.
Was there any conversation about using the, I think it's probably like 1970s technology of that S-shaped giant piece of equipment that moves Jersey barricades? So you could imagine in the morning, there are 4 lanes inbound and 2 or 3 outbound on the Pike. And then in the evening, switch it so that the more lanes are going in the direction of rush hour flow, and shrink it that way. Was there any conversation about doing something like that?
So MassDOT's contention from the very beginning has always been, we're just going to rebuild as many highway lanes as we have today. And so there's lots of possibilities. What you're discussing, which is having some, movable lanes. Chris Dempsey, one of the transportation leaders in Brookline, and his organization, Transportation for Massachusetts, has been a big proponent of variable rate tolling. And one of the advantages of making the tolls on the Mass Pike a little more expensive during rush hour, and then maybe making them a little bit cheaper during off-peak hours, is maybe to borrow the phrase, flatten the curve. Instead of having a big peak of people on the highway from that 7, 8 o'clock in the morning time, where you might make a case that you need 4 inbound lanes. Well, if with some tolling changes, a few more people travel, at 6:30 in the morning, and a few more people travel at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, then you don't have that rush hour crush anymore. A whole new variable also is with COVID and how that's changing how people commute and work. And a lot of companies now saying, we're never going back to a 9 to 5, 5 day a week in the office schedule. That also may change, when people are driving, how often people are, going into the office, and do you have that same morning peak with the same number of cars 2 years or 5 years or 10 years from now as we did, 2 years ago.
Well, and as you pointed out earlier, it's a 10-year construction project. So whether or not it's 2 or 5 or 10 years from now, they're still only going to have 3 lanes. It's really about 2035 and beyond. Are folks going to figure out how to commute less often during those peaks? And maybe that's, a half day at home, a half a day in the office. Maybe that's, I'm only going to go in the office 3 or 4 days a week, right? There's lots of different ways we can imagine people who continue to drive in by themselves, taking up the most sort of space per transportation person, still not needing all of that space. And so how do you feel MassDOT has balanced the transportation needs, wants, desires of commuters with the needs, wants, desires of people in Allston, people in Brookline, frankly, BU students who live immediately adjacent to their needs for park access, recreation, transportation that scales to their abilities, which may be more likely walking and biking or using transit as they are driving, to say nothing of their desire for clean air, breathing in less tailpipes a day. How is MassDOT done in balancing those needs, in your opinion?
So MassDOT has been running this project from their highway department. That's who's in charge, and that in and of itself speaks volumes for the priorities that we see and how they're approaching this whole thing. The MBTA, which is part of MassDOT, has been completely silent and out of the conversation. In fact, it was really shocking yesterday when MassDOT's Secretary Pollock put up a slide during her presentation talking about all the things that are outside of MassDOT's control. And she had a whole slide about the MBTA and saying, well, gee, there's nothing that MassDOT can do about all these MBTA issues. When, as you know, and many others know, she runs the MBTA, she's in charge of the MBTA. She and the governor have complete control over both, who's chosen to run the MBTA and all sorts of other decisions about the MBTA. She chairs or sits on the fiscal management control board. She was blaming DCR for things yesterday. And at the same time, DCR has been really shut out of this process. This has been a highway project from day one. And while there's, some occasional lip service to transit and other things, when we talk about when's West Station going to be built, can it be built at the beginning of the project? And can, commuter rail and bus service be improved to, lessen the impact of the, spillover traffic and having lanes on the highway shut down during construction? MassDOT always refuses to, for years, they've refused to talk about it. Although yesterday, Secretary Pollock finally said that that's going to start to get some attention. That's welcome news, but could have happened years ago. So this is, all these issues about urban design, city building, quality of life, environmental justice, clean air, walking, biking. When you put a bunch of highway designers in charge of the project, those things are just going to fall off the list, which is what has happened time and time again.
And so the letter that the secretary released yesterday, I just had a few things I pulled away from it. One is that she's arguing that those who benefit from it should have to help pay for it, which is not a standard that we apply to building roads in suburban or rural areas at all. In fact, that Chapter 90 money is clearly cross-subsidized by the economic activity of Boston. The other thing that stood out to me was that I read it as, in some ways, the project is going to take a pause and wait for some other decisions outside of MassDOT's immediate control to be made before some further decision-making is going to happen. Is that so? And if so, does that present an opportunity for folks who live in Brookline, folks who live in Alston, to continue to weigh in on the future of this project?
So what yesterday was announced was we're going to look at how to patch this up for the next 5 or 10 years and, kick the can down the road, defer any hard decisions, and, spend as little money possible today. And I think that's really pretty consistent with the philosophy of this administration that we've seen for years and years. That's what happened with the Bowker overpass. That's what happened with the Store Drive tunnel in the Back Bay. And maybe that's the best thing to do if this administration can't show some more leadership and help, figure out a better solution. Certainly, those of us who have been working as volunteers on this project for the last 6 years would love to see a, more progressive and, well-rounded project come out of this. but it's going to take more than just saying, well, maybe in 12 months there'll be a consensus. We're not going to get a consensus just by, flipping pages on the calendar. The way we're going to get a consensus is by having the, leadership at MassDOT really engage with the residents and the advocates and the business community and everyone else who's been involved in this project, and, sit down and work through these issues in some creative ways.
It's funny, I didn't put the books here for this reason, but right next to my Robert Moses book is my Profiles and Courage book. And it sounds like you're not nominating anyone from the administration for Profiles and Courage too. Harry, from the People's Pike, this has been really, really helpful to me in understanding these details, and hopefully helpful to my viewers as well. I'm very grateful that you took the time to spend some time with us on Brookline Interactive Group. And I wish your family well for Thanksgiving. And frankly, I hope that you don't all get together. I've been reminding folks, we're really, the COVID numbers are getting worse and worse. And Thanksgiving has the real potential to be a super spreader event. So I know you want to gloat to your aunts and uncles that Biden beat Trump. Not you, Harry, personally necessarily, but this is not the year to do it. They don't want to hear that anyway. So I encourage folks, invest in your own aluminum pan and make your own turkey this Thanksgiving. Figure out how it's done. All of us millennials and Gen Xers have to learn how to make our own turkeys one of these days. This is the year. So Harry, thanks again for coming on. Delighted that you can share this with us. And I encourage folks to check out People's Pike and follow along on this saga.